This is the top of the line for today's military movers. A 174-foot-long, 270,000-pound C-17 cargo plane, capable of traveling at over 500 miles an hour for over 3,200 miles on a single fueling. With four 42,000-pound turbofan engines, it is capable of 162,000 pounds of thrust.
The C-17 has been a marvelous airplane. Its reliability is great. It allows us to move 18 pallets or any number of passengers into country, to go into very short runways for takeoff and landings. And when we surgically went into Afghanistan and took out the runway, we then had to come and operate out of those same runways.
The hold on this megaplane is capable of transporting jeeps, Humvees, even tanks. It can also be reconfigured to accommodate 102 paratroops, or 144 regular troops, or 48 litters for medical evacuations.
The purpose of this plane is basically anything the Air Force wants it to do. They'll get things to the front line as soon as possible.
The C-17 has some spectacular features that make it a favorite of logistics planners. One is its ability to refuel in midair.
We have a regular C-17 which holds 180,000 pounds, and we have an extended range which I believe holds 220,000 pounds of fuel and gets us pretty far. And they have an aerial refueling receptacle on the top of the airplane, and we can stay in the air as long as they need us to.
One other thing that makes this plane a little bit unique is we can fly with night vision goggles, and so we can go into dimly lit or runways without any light. It also helps us to scan for threats in a combat environment. It's actually one of the easier planes to fly because it is all glass and it does a lot for you. We have autopilot and auto throttle, so you can hook those up and it'll do everything for you. It's really a lot of fun to fly.
The turbofan engines are a hybrid of old piston-driven propellers and jets. The C-17 is the culmination of nearly a century of military aviation research and development. And it is the most recent of the many C-designated or cargo aircraft military movers in the Air Force arsenal. Before the 20th century, transportation consisted of land or sea travel. But within that century, air travel blossomed into one of the most effective and efficient logistical tools. Cargo aircraft really began with the more sophisticated twin-engine propeller planes developed in the late 1930s, specifically the C-47 and C-46.
It's interesting to look at the quantum leap and evolution that takes place between World War I and World War II, where you jump up to a level of technology where you have multi-engine, piston-driven aircraft capable of carrying 6,000 pounds of cargo in the case of the C-47, 10,000 pounds of cargo in the case of the C-46.
The C-46 Commando was capable of carrying as many as 50 men and had 2 loading doors. The more familiar C-47 carried only 28 men and had 1 door, but served in a combat role towing gliders and dropping paratroopers into enemy territory. The post-war period saw a series of piston-driven airplanes like the C-119 Boxcar, supplanted by the turboprop workhorse C-130 Hercules, and ultimately, the jet-powered C-141 Starlifter. The biggest of them all was the massive C-5. At the time of its introduction in the late 1960s, the largest aircraft in the world. But a military mover 247 feet long and 65 feet high, with a 270,000-pound payload and a maximum takeoff weight of 840,000 pounds, needs its space and about 8,000 feet of runway. And this is where the C-17 comes in. The smaller, more agile C-17 would do what the lumbering C-5 could never do, and in places the C-5 could never go. The C-17 was conceived in 1980 when the Air Force requested a versatile cargo plane with a large load capacity, combined with the ability to land at unimproved airstrips under battle conditions.
The C-17 is obviously smaller than the C-5 Galaxy. The C-17's overall size is closer to, say, a C-130 or C-141. but at the same time, it can carry more than a C-130 or a C-141. So by having smaller aircraft that costs less money overall to manufacture, we can have a larger fleet of C-17s.
One of the C-17's most important features is that it is a big, empty shell. Loadmaster Scott Wetzel is in charge of filling this one.
The Loadmaster is a jack of all trades. For cargo missions, the Loadmaster plans the cargo, where it's going to be placed in the aircraft. We determine how much the aircraft weighs. We have to balance the aircraft for flight. When we carry passengers, the Loadmaster administers meals. We pass out blankets, pillows, comfort items for the passengers.
Loading this 18-foot wide, 15-foot high compartment with 172,000 pounds of freight requires a computer, a crew, and a plan.
Right now, the aircraft is set up to download the rolling stock. Once the rolling stock is off the aircraft, we would need to reconfigure the floor to move the pallets out. To do that, the first thing we're going to do is flip over all the rollers. We raise the guide rails. The aircraft would be open. We come over here to the side panel. These pallets are locked into the side rails. The locks are electrically controlled. They're going to retract into the floor, and that will release the pallet. Then all we would do is simply push the pallet off the aircraft.
Specially designed hydraulic forklift cranes called K-loaders help load the C-17 and can even be driven right on board through the back loading ramp.
It reaches up to 225 inches up in the air. It can uphold 25,000 pounds of cargo or rolling stock at one time.
The C-17 began assisting military operations in the Balkans in the early 90s, having just missed action during the Gulf War. Since then, it has proven itself in hundreds of humanitarian sorties, dropping 2.5 million individual rations during Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan and Operation Iraqi Freedom.
I believe it's the cream of the crop. I fly on them as well, and they've done things that I've never seen any other airplane do before. It's got great maneuverability, short distance landing, takeoff. It can haul anything. It's great airplane.
A specially constructed flight simulator helps pilots get a feel for the C-17. But much of the actual flying is done with onboard computers.
This is what we use to control the aircraft for turning and climbing. These are our throttles, and this gives us the power. We have our flaps right here. Down in here, this is our computer. Pull up a flight plan, and you put where you're going to fly to in the computer, and then it'll come up on here. So you can hook it up to the autopilot, and it'll fly it for you.
Not surprisingly, in addition to the 120 aircraft which will be fully delivered by 2004, the military has requested another 60 C-17s. And until the next generation of aircraft flies from the drawing board into the war zone, the C-17 Globemaster III will remain the most flexible of all the airborne military movers.